Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp of the Lump. We're going to jump right back into where we left off of Incountry, or my version of Incountry anyway. So we've got our Ranger Fire team over here kind of spread out, but again, they're super elites in our game. They're not Marines, but they're close. So we're giving them the ability to not have to worry about cohesion. All right, so nothing like that. They can be as far apart as they want. And we're trying to keep the bad guys 4 inches apart. Now, I talked about it a little bit in the previous video, but the big thing about this game is this reaction thing, right? So when it's going back and forth, right? You have your turn and you can do these things: assault, engage, reposition. Then your opponent, I'm trying to keep this out of the glare of the light, my apologies. They can take cover, return fire, or ambush. So basically, they can do their 3 things when you're activating, and you have a choice of your 3 things, your 3 measures when you're activating. Now, first thing is your tokens will automatically come off when someone activates. So all these little defensive tokens go away. But someone who is suppressed, which is the backside of this token, if you were suppressed on a previous turn, that gets flipped over. Okay, so you don't get to activate. Basically, suppression takes away a chance for you to activate that team, but it does keep them defensive because they're going to keep their heads down, right? You know, you get shot at, that oh crap pucker factor kicks in, you're going to pop down. So it does make sense to have defensive measures. Now, our guys are set. For our purposes, remember, it's a night mission. They're not seeing them up until they get caught. So once the firefight starts, then we're just running it as normal. But so far, they haven't got caught. So they got in a good position and they can open fire. And what I think I'm going to do is engage with them, because the way it works as far as all these go. All right, so execute with any of you guys. Defensive tokens get removed from your teams, and any team with a suppressed token flips it to defensive status. Has all that listed at the top. So if these guys were suppressed a previous round, they would get flipped over to defensive. But if I were to assault, that means I get to move and then fire at close range. But if you assault, you can be ambushed. Okay? So depending on what you choose here, assault, engage, or reposition determines what type of reactions you can expect from the enemy forces, if I can get it to stay focused. So assaulting is basically, we're going to get in close. We're going to, hook and jab, either at close quarters combat or actually, knife fighting type stuff, right? Engaging is we're going to shoot them from a distance. There are different ranges when you're firing, though, your preferred range. For assault, close is your preferred range. So if you are not within close range, you're going to be suffering a penalty, which means you're not going to be using a lower grip. All right, so you'll have a higher number that you'll have to roll to be able to hit those targets. We're kind of in close range here, at least for these guys here, but he's not in close range, so he wouldn't get that benefit. So I think it'd be better to engage. When you engage, though, you can only move up to about 1 inch. Assault, you can move up to your full movement factor. Reposition, you can move your movement factor plus 2 inches like they started with, but you don't get to shoot at all. The enemy, when they're choosing, they can always take cover, right? So shooting from engaging or assaulting, they have the option to take cover. So anytime you're firing at the enemy, they have the option to take cover, and they just flat out get a defensive token, making it harder for them to hit. Essentially, when they take that defensive token, it means you're going to need a higher level grip to be hit. All right, so a higher number to get hit. When it comes to the next option, return fire, they can do that when they are being engaged. Okay, so if I engage them, they can choose not to take a defensive token, and they can choose to return fire at me. So I will have an easier chance hitting them, but whoever survives gets a chance to shoot back at me. All right, so that's one of your options. And then potentially you can ambush. An ambush is a result of assault or reposition. All right, so return fire is for engaging, ambush is for assault or reposition. So if I were to choose to assault, that means I'm trying to get in close on them. They can ambush me and they get to fire first. Return fire, they shoot after. So their shots would resolve after my shots. But if they ambush, then their shots resolve before my shots. And I don't get a chance to take cover because I've already chose to do whatever it is, assault or reposition. So they'll have potentially an easier chance. Essentially, they're catching you out in the open, or they're tucked away somewhere and they pop up and they ambush you. But that's the entire premise of how this game operates. It's that choosing the back and forth system. What measure are you going to pick for your team? And depending on what measure you pick, they have certain options available to them. Generally, it's going to be either taking cover or some form of shooting back at you. And depending on your situation and the enemy situation, it might behoove them to tuck their heads down, or it might behoove them to try to take you out. If they catch you in a position where you don't have as much cover, hey, all right, it's going to be an easier grip for them to shoot at you if you're out in the open. So maybe they'll take the shot back. But hey, if you're in a lot of cover, they're not going to have as easy a shot. Maybe they're out in the open. Okay, well then it's going to behoove them to take cover themselves, so more of their guys will have a chance to survive. However, it works the same way when the shooting actually goes on back and forth, because you're still rolling for those grips, those numbers, right? And remember, when I'm talking about grips, I'm talking about these three numbers: easy, normal, and hard. And for our purposes, my 4 guys have the best level grips, and the infinite guys have the worst level grips because they're innumerable. There's no end of them, so I gave them the worst stat numbers. So instead of talking about it so much, let's do an engagement so I can kind of show you. I'm trying to decide if I'm a split fire, because I can split fire if I want to, but I don't think these teams are close enough to really do that anyway. Actually, no, that I'm saying that it has to be 2 teams that you have line of sight to, and they do have 2 teams they have line of sight to. There's a team over here, one guy's up there on that roof, and then there's a team over here. And you can shoot at anyone you have line of sight to. Now, something that's interesting is that your models can get their line of sight from a model that they have in base-to-base contact. All right, so let's use these guys as an example. I'll move them back in just a second. Pretend this truck is a wall for a second, so you can't see over it. It's blocking line of sight. So you've got one model here tucked around the corner, right, looking over that way so he can fire. If your second model is up against him like that, essentially this model gets to trace his line of sight from this model's position. But the enemy, when they fire back, they get to trace their line of sight to this second model from this model as well. What that essentially is doing is like in the action movies or something like that, where you see one guy is crouched down around the corner of a building and his buddy's standing behind him, leaning over him, firing over top of him, so they can both target the enemy. That's essentially how that plays out. So your friendly models that are touching each other can trace their line of sight from each other. Now that doesn't trace all the way back, right? So you couldn't have, a line of models, ding, 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 all the way back behind a building and have them all tracing it like they're that guy. They can only trace from the front guy, the one that they're actually touching. So that is something to keep in mind when you're doing your engagements, is that you do have that chance. But if you are doing that, if you're doing that so your front 2 guys can get shots off, remember, when the enemy shoots back, that means effectively he's poking his head out too. He can get shot too. So you have to, keep that in mind. Let's put these guys right back over here where they were. They're tucked in behind this truck and getting ready to fire. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to slow down the teams. I'm going to split fire since, we'll split fire. I'm going to have these 3 target these guys, right? This team over here, probably these 3 are going to be the ones that I target, especially that one on the roof, because he's got good lines of sight pretty much down everywhere. And I'm going to have my saw gunner over here target that enemy team. So essentially what I want to happen is the Saw Gunner, yeah, he might be able to put some hurt onto these guys, but more specifically, I want him to try to get a suppression token on them. So if I can cause some damage over here and get a suppression marker over there, that would be great. But remember, he's the only one that's got a little bonus to his weapon. He's cyclic, which means he gets to roll 3 dice when he attacks versus the rifles, which pretty much everyone else has, that only get 1 die per attack. All right, so now I get to pick what I'm doing with these other 2 teams. What are they going to do in reaction to being engaged by these guys? So they can either return fire or they can take cover. And I think we're going to take cover. I think we're going to take cover, especially with this first group, because they need to try to survive. Essentially, these guys are just guarding. It doesn't matter really how many of them get killed. Their goal is just to keep these guys pinned down and prevent them from gaining access to the buildings where the hostage is. So the longer they can survive and get a pot shot off every now and then, all they need is a lucky hit to go through. They're kind of like orcs, right? The orcs in Warhammer 40,000, there's bukus of the orcs. Don't really matter if you lose 10 of them as long as you can take out a Space Marine. And you know what? I think we're going to do the same thing over here as well. So we'll toss them a defensive token. So both teams are going defensive. They're taking cover. Remember, what that means is since they are concealed, they're all tucked behind something, right? He's up on a roof, so he's behind the little lip here of the roof. They're behind a little concrete wall. He's behind some tires. You know, same thing with these guys over here. They're all in cover. All right, to some extent, or not cover. There's concealment and cover in this game. Concealment is them being behind something, so that knocks it up a grip. And since they're now taking cover, it essentially knocks it up another grip. So it's going to be like the hardest shot for them to get off. So what that essentially means is for all of my guys, they've all got to roll 8s or better, all right? If it were just concealment, so if they had decided to return fire, they would, the Rangers would only need a 5 to hit them. They would be able to use their normal grip since they are just in concealment, right? So they're behind some type of cover. And it's driving me crazy because concealment is being hidden by something. Cover is actually something that'll stop a bullet. But you know, the way they've got it worded in the rules. So yeah, it is what it is. So regardless, we need 8s or better. We'll fire with these 3 first. They're targeting this team. And we'll re-roll that one because that was cocked. Oh, they got 2 hits. 2 hits is not bad. So the 9 and the 10 are hits. The 1 is a miss. Now they do get to roll an attempted save. They have to roll their normal grip. For these guys, since they're crap, their normal grip is a 10, so they need 10s. Now this isn't a save. This is a basically survive the critical hit. All right, so what's happening is that they have to roll their normal grip, whatever the unit's normal grip is, to not gain an injury token, okay? Thing is, you can do something that's called an ace. Now, an ace is, let's say you needed a normal grip to hit, but you equaled your hard grip or higher. So you got the higher number even though you didn't need it. That essentially is an ace, which means you can now require the enemy to have a hard grip, right? Their higher number to be able to not get injured. So it's kind of like getting a critical hit. It makes them harder. It makes it harder for them to save the injuries that they receive. All right, so we'll roll for them. For them, it's just going to be their normal grip, but that's not going to matter since it's 10s either way for normal and hard. So they're going to need 10s on either. And they got 5 on both. So no, they're going to get 2 critical tokens, 2 injury tokens. We'll throw those down. All right, we'll do our shooting real quick over here against this team, and then we'll finish that out. So remember, he's cyclic. He's firing 3 die, and he can hit multiple guys, but only if they're within 2 inches of each other. So the only ones that he can actually do this to are these first 2 right there. I'm bumping my camera. Those are close enough, so essentially he's like spraying and praying across, and he can hit them, but he can't hit the guy that's on the roof or the one that's back over here because they're too far away for him to hit as one burst. So let's roll for him. It doesn't matter whatever he gets. So even if he got 3 successes here, it wouldn't matter. He wouldn't be able to take out 3 guys. And damn, he's actually rolling pretty good too. Let's see. He got 0, 9, and 1. So he got 2 successes as well. All right, actually, before I do the injury tokens for him, I need to roll to see if they get the injury tokens. So let's roll for him real quick. And nope, they saved 1. Perfect. So they only receive a single injury token. All right, now here is how suppression kicks into the game, okay? So they've got 2 injury tokens. Essentially, they've got 2 guys that have been killed off. They've lost 2 guys. If they have returned fire and they had scored some hits, they would potentially be able to block some of these injury tokens, but that didn't come into effect. So they're just flat out receiving those. When it comes to suppression, there are a couple different things that come into play. If a model is removed from as a critical, so takes a injury, the team requires a normal grip to avoid being suppressed. But if a team has a model that passes its survival grip, not getting an injury token, then they only need an easy. So normally you would just roll against the hardest. For this game specifically, I'm going to make one little alteration in the fact that I'm going to allow them to roll against their easiest. Since they did have one that passed, I'll let them roll against their easiest. Otherwise, I'm afraid that they would end up suppressed far too often. And I don't want them to constantly be suppressed. I want them to be able to put some fire towards the Rangers. So they require a 10, and they're going to require a 6 or better to avoid being suppressed. So let's roll for a first team here. And they failed, although they would have passed if it was them. And second team. Oh, look at that. Look at that. If it had been the first roll, they both would have done it. All right, so ultimately, they have lost 2 guys. They've lost a single, and both teams are now suppressed. So I'm going to take this one off the roof, and we'll take this other one that's close here because I'm trying to get into this building. And as far as these guys go, we'll just take the closest one. Now, since both ended up being suppressed and they had taken cover, I can simply flip these tokens over to signify the fact that they are suppressed right now. So the next time they go to activate, they can flip those over. Boom. They'll be defensive for that round, and then they'll be able to activate again like normal. Now, like I said, though, I'm going to take these guys, the ones that got wiped out, and I'm going to pop them along the back edge over there, and they're going to come in here on the next round. They'll start pouring in and be able to activate. Since there's 3, we'll just activate them together. All right, so now that we have finished our Ranger activation, right, they've done their measure, it goes to the Insurgents. They get to do something. So remember, they get to activate a measure. They get to do a thing with any one of their teams that they can. Any defensive tokens are removed, but any team with a suppression token flips it to its defensive side. So that was essentially saying that they are not able to be activated this round. So we got the 2 guys left here. Both of those would be flipped over, right? Boom. They're defensive this round. It means they're still down. Same for this team over here. They're defensive for this turn, which means there's only the single team over there or these guys back there that I could activate. But I'm probably going to wait 1 activation on them so I don't have a steady stream of them coming in. So what we are going to do is we're going to do a reposition with this team that's over here tucked on the far right building. And remember, the hostage could be in this building. We don't know. But the Ranger team's going to be pushing their way across, so I'm really hoping she didn't put him there, because if he did, or if she did rather, then that means it's going to take me forever to find that damn guy. But we'll deal with it. These guys are going to be a little slow because they're going to come down off this roof, and this is about 4 inches. So if they've got 4 normally, and then plus another 2 with their reposition, that means they move about 2 inches. These guys could move a little bit farther, but I want to try to keep them in cohesion. And I'm thinking I might bring them down along the road here to try to flank up on that saw gunner, because if they can do that, that'll really hurt them. So let's move these guys up just a little bit. And then these guys are essentially coming down from the building. Remember, that's our RPG right there, but he has to have a round to set up. So basically, the way I'm counting with him is that he has to spend at least one turn. He couldn't have moved the previous turn before he fires his RPG. And then he'll have a chance to fire that off. But since they are doing a reposition, they do get to go defensive. But here's the thing. Remember, it's back and forth. So you can choose to do stuff with your team, right? So I still have the Ranger team. I can still do stuff with them. They're not suppressed right now. They can do an ambush since they're repositioning. They're moving up. They're defensive. They're going to be harder to hit. But I've only got one guy that can hit them. This saw gunner down over here. The other guys, they're so far to the left. There's so much debris and junk between them and this team over here. We're just going to say they're out of line of sight. So he is going to go ahead and ambush. They're defensive. They are behind junk, concealment. So he's not going to be able to use anything besides his hard grip. But he will be able to get a chance to fire at him. I'll tell you what, putting that saw gunner right here in the center with just open fields of fire is a severe advantage for the Rangers. All right, so let's roll for his attack. He's looking for 8s or better here. And he got a single hit. Throw our single token down. And let's see. All right, so let's see if they can save against it. Oh, and they did. They did. Oh, no hit for him. No hit. Brutal. All right, so the saw gunner tried, but he wasn't able to get anything going. All right, so it is back to my one team, and this is throwing me off. I probably should have done these guys as 2 and 2. I think that would have been a little more appropriate since there's just unending teams over here, and it's just one single team that gets to activate. And that's given them kind of an advantage because they all get to fire on the insurgents team, but it's all right. This is a learning game for us. Here's the thing. They got to move, though. He's not moving. And let's see. They need to get up there. I need to do what's called an interact action so I can get into that building, but there's only a little bit of cover right here. Some of these boxes, they're defensive. But these guys have line of fire. So do these, but they have one extra guy, so they could get 3 shots off on them. It really doesn't matter where I put them, because if I move them around, then they could do an ambush shot on them. And then the next time these guys activate, they would be able to get shots off on them too. And even if it's only 2 shots, they still just need a 10 to get some hurt through. All right, here's what we're going to do. Because I want to get them a little closer to that building because they're not quite close enough, especially since they do have to pop over a little bit of a wall here, which would slow them down. They wouldn't have enough movement points. Maybe if they tucked around that way, but again, they'd have to jump crates. It's just a little too much. So we're going to reposition just to get them close enough so they can sprint towards that building on the next turn. I'm trying to just keep as many of them tucked by this truck as I can. All right, so put them there as such. That way I'm spending basically their movement to get them over to there. Give them a defensive token as well. Everyone's going defensive, but that way they're close, they're tucked behind this truck, and they can run towards that building and use this little bit of wall as cover for their next turn against these guys. But they are going to get some shots because they're going to fire on them. So basically, this team is the one that I'm going to shoot with because they still got 3 guys left in them. Have them fire because they can fire up to long range. Long range is 48 inches, so they've easily got that covered. They're in like medium range right now. Either team could fire down on them, but I want to have as many shots as possible. So we'll give them 3 shots. firing down on them. But again, it's going to require 10s to hit because it doesn't matter. These guys are defensive, plus they're in cover behind the truck. So regardless, they would have a hard shot. So let's see if we get any hurt through. Nope, nothing. 6, 5, and 1. I'll tell you what, the same dice, but it is going good for the Rangers and bad for those insurgents. All right, so where we're leaving off for this video, the Rangers are tucked over here behind the truck. The one saw gunner's down here at the bottom, hanging out. These two teams have been weakened a little bit, but more guys are pouring in. This team over here is flanking around to try to take out the saw gunner, because if they do, that's pretty well game. That saw gunner is key for them. But they're trying to get over there to get that hostage, whatever building the hostage might be in, and we're going to pick up with the insurgents on their turn. Here's the thing. All the insurgents have, well, with the exception of that team back there, but all of them have defensive tokens right now. Thing of it is, though, is that as soon as they go to activate one team, doesn't matter what team it is, they all lose their defensive tokens. Because on your turn, defensive tokens are removed from your teams, right? So you can't stack up defensive tokens all across your teams. It just happened to work that way, the way their activations worked. The guys getting suppressed and whatnot, they cause them all to end up with defensive tokens, but more than likely, they won't usually end up like that. In other words, it kind of prevents you from turtling, you know, tucking in a bunch of teams, keeping them all defensive so they're really hard to hit, and then, you know, pot shotting back. So these guys are going to be able to move in, but they do have the advantage that they can just keep slamming guys towards the Rangers. And the Rangers, no matter how good they are, eventually they'll get hit. And once they start losing guys, it's going to be pretty hard on them. As far as the game goes when it's playing solitaire, one of the things I've kind of noticed is the part that makes this a better game when it comes to playing it heads up against someone, right? That reactive nature, the fact that you never feel like you're doing nothing, right? Anytime your opponent is doing something, you have an option. You're doing something back to them, even if it's just taking cover. Right? Doesn't matter, whatever they're doing, you get to do something as well. And because of that, I almost feel like it's easier to forget that because you are more used to it in a solitary version of, well, I'm going to do X here and then I'm going to do Y there, you know, back and forth. And I think it would be easier to forget to do that reactive measure with whatever team it was, you know, the insurgents, the good guys, whoever you're playing as. Since that is that back and forth nature, you just have to make sure you keep it in mind that whenever someone does something, someone else is going to do something back, even if it's just taking cover. But that really is the part that stands out about the game is you don't feel like you're just sitting back on your laurels. You're doing something. You're getting to make a choice, whether it's taking cover, whether it's getting some shots back. And I haven't even got to show you guys that yet, but essentially, you do have a chance to gain injury tokens when you're shooting that can prevent you. You can kind of spend them to prevent injuries to your own troops. It's kind of hard for the insurgents to get them because they have such a hard time getting any hits since they require 10s. But the Rangers might get some here on the next video, so I'll be able to show you guys what I'm talking about. Anyway, y'all stay tuned. We'll pick up with the next video, see if they can push into this first building. Maybe find a hostage. If they do, this will be a very quick mission. I doubt it. The odds are 25%, so we'll have to see if he's there or not. But if they don't, they've got a long highway of hell to cross, especially since now that I'm thinking about it, bad guys are going to start pouring in behind them. Because as it is now, they're kind of sweeping and all the bad guys are in front of them. But as they push around, they're going to start having guys who spawn in on their 6. That's definitely going to be a problem for them because they won't be able to stay in cover for sure on that anymore. Anyway, you guys stay tuned. I will pick up with the next video as soon as I can. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.